Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. When it comes to Star Wars history, we mainly focus on a narrow period of time ranging from a few decades before the Battle of Yavin to a few decades after the Battle of Yavin. That's because the mainline films mostly follow the Skywalker saga and the end to the chaotic Jedi and Sith conflict that has lasted for thousands and thousands of years. And while we are led to believe that these moments in history were the most devastating and destructive in Star Wars history, the reality is these conflicts hardly even make our top 5 list when it comes to the most destructive conflicts in Star Wars. Let's take a look. While some historians might say that the Galactic Civil War started the moment the Clone Wars ended, others place that date at 4 years before the Battle of Yavin, almost 15 years after the Clone Wars ended. We here at Generation Tech, however, look at 2 years before the Battle of Yavin as the official beginning of the Galactic Civil War, because that is when the Rebel Alliance was officially created in 2 BBY. Prior to this, you had independent rebel cells operating in their own regional conflicts against the Empire with drastically different goals and different ideologies. But once Mon Mothma was declared a fugitive and left the Senate, it was her speech and call to action that finally united these various factions into the Rebel Alliance. And so by our calculations, the Galactic Civil War spans from 2 ABY to roughly around 5 BBY, which means that the war only lasted 7 years, while by Earth standards, 7 years seems like a pretty long period of time for a galactic war. It's really quite short if you think about it. The fall of the Galactic Empire, especially post-Endor, was swift and dramatic. Now, what qualifies the Galactic Civil War for this list of horrendous and destructive conflicts is 2 major things. One, the destruction of Alderaan through the use of the Death Star, along with the various test firings the Imperials did on Scarif and Jedha, created billions and billions of casualties. Alderaan was also seen as a culturally and historically significant planet. And whereas Coruscant is mainly seen as the brain and nerve center of the galaxy, Alderaan was actually seen as its heart. It was a cultural and historical and artistic center, especially for the human species, which might have originated there. The second event that was equally as sinister was Emperor Palpatine's contingency plan, the main cause of the Empire's very swift fall after his supposed death. Emperor Palpatine believed that an empire that could no longer protect its emperor deserved to no longer exist, which is why the contingency plan's main focus was to destroy the Imperial military and destroy most of the Imperial worlds underneath the Empire's control. Palpatine's Sentinel messengers and protege Gallius Rax orchestrated strategies that sacrificed large portions of the Imperial fleet to the New Republic fleet. Given the size of the Galactic Empire's navy, which was the largest in galactic history, the sheer amount of destruction and loss of life and material during this period of time was enormous. The Battle of Jakku was the culmination of this strategy and was one of the most devastating battles of the war. Prior to Endor, the Imperial Navy was spread thin across the galaxy, defending all of its holdings. Even at the Battle of Endor, only a dozen or so ISDs could be spared from their posts. After the collapse and loss of all of these systems, you basically had large amount of ships and soldiers with nowhere to go. Their main problems now on Jakku were logistical and supply related. And so the Battle of Jakku featured the largest fleets gathered by either side of the war so far. And casualties would have been even higher if the rebels hadn't been able to stop the Empire's plan to detonate the core of the planet, killing everyone on its surface. Another aspect of the contingency plan was Operation Cinder. This was a sort of scorched earth policy adopted by Palpatine's hardline followers. Small groups of Imperial forces, usually using weapons of mass destruction, would target rich Imperial worlds, including Vardos, Naboo, Commenor, and many more. The idea, once again, was to punish the Empire for not being able to protect the Emperor and keeping strategic worlds, resources, and wealth out of the New Republic's hands. Although the rebellion was able to stop certain portions of Operation Cinder, most of these attacks on innocent Imperial worlds were quite successful. While the Galactic Civil War did cause a lot of damage to the galaxy, it lasted less than a decade. During the Old Republic period, however, it's quite common for wars to last hundreds, if not thousands, of years. After the Republic and Jedi carried out a genocide against the Sith Empire after their failed Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY, a small faction of the Sith survived under the leadership of the very powerful Sith Emperor known as Vitiate. They basically went into the unknown region and started rebuilding their forces. For the next 1,000 years, the Immortal Emperor would plan in hiding and use his immense power to spark and ignite proxy wars starting in 4000 BBY with the Great Sith War, when long-dead fallen Jedi Freedon Nod was able to trigger an uprising in the Empress Teta system, which eventually led to an attack on Republic space. Other Jedi like Ulic Qel-Droma and Exar Kun would also fall and join the side of the Sith, carving a path through the Republic until they finally reached Coruscant. Now, the Sith were finally defeated after Qel-Droma was captured and basically betrayed Exar Kun. Just 20 years later, the Mandalorian Wars started in 3976 BBY. Mandalore, the ultimate pioneer of the Neo-Crusader movement, was put under the influence of the Sith Emperor Vitiate. The Neo-Crusader period was perhaps the height of Mandalorian power. Their society at the time had become highly organized, and their numbers had grown to a massive size. They swept across the outer rim of the galaxy and soon started threatening more important Republic worlds. The Mandalorian Wars would lead to the Revanchist movement led by the Jedi Knight Revan. The Jedi Council at the time had remained neutral in this conflict because they had not perceived any Sith manipulations behind the scenes. The Jedi Knights under Revan's command would stop the Mandalorian onslaught and slowly turn the war against them. Until finally, 16 years after the war first started, the Mandalorians were finally defeated at Malachor V, where an entire Mandalorian fleet was destroyed by a superweapon used by Revan. Now, this war was so devastating that Revan would fall to the dark side, as would many of his followers. Revan would leave the Republic for the unknown region in search for the Sith Emperor, and return a year later at the head of a massive Sith fleet and attack the Republic in a conflict known as the Jedi Civil War, which itself would last until 3956. The Republic at this time was extremely close to completely collapsing because of the constant warfare it had undergone in the last few decades, along with the betrayal of the Jedi. But what was left of the Jedi Order eventually managed to capture Revan, and the Sith Civil War ensued as the followers of Revan fought for control over the remains of his forces and empire. During this time, the Sith warlords would orchestrate the Jedi Purge and target the 100 or so Jedi that remained in the galaxy. The Jedi Order was almost completely wiped out, but fortunately the Sith turned against each other, and in 3950, they finally destroyed each other, ending Revan's own Sith Empire. Now, a few centuries later, Emperor Vitiate of the true Sith Empire would finally launch his invasion of the Republic in 3681 BBY, starting by retaking the ancient Sith ruins of Korriban. The Republic, which had barely recovered from the old Sith Wars, was hardly prepared for another galaxy-wide conflict. The Sith Empire, leading a massive fleet, of which the likes of the galaxy had never seen, conquered most of the Outer Rim and again slowly worked their way towards the core worlds, in a campaign of destruction that lasted for 28 years. Finally, while using a peace summit on Alderaan as a distraction, the Sith Empire launched a small but precise attack on Coruscant, destroying the Jedi Temple and killing all of the Jedi within it. The Chancellor of the Republic was also assassinated during this attack. The Republic was forced to agree to the Treaty of Coruscant, which essentially forced the Republic to cede a massive amount of territory to the Sith, leading to a Cold War between the two factions. In 2000 BBY, the new Sith Wars, otherwise known as the Dragulk period, started. This would be 1,000 years of constant conflict and skirmishes between a new Sith Order and the Republic. This period of 1,000 years is widely hailed as the Dark Ages of Republic history by most historians. As usual, a new Sith Order arises after a schism occurs. This is the fourth one if we're counting. The Jedi Order once again is unable to agree on how to handle dark side teachings, so Darth Throne, the first of the Lost 20, would become the first to leave the Order during this period and take on the mantle of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Now, these early battles between the new Sith and the Republic were mainly carried out by modernized fleets of warships and all sorts of crazy super weapons. But as the war entered into its 5th century of constant fighting, the toll in the galaxy began to show as civilization literally began to decay on both sides. large portions of the galaxy had become isolated and completely cut off from government services and protection, and so criminal scum and gangs were taking over, especially in the outer rim areas of the galaxy. The HoloNet would eventually collapse, leading to communications blackouts, and the interstellar supply chain would also be cut, leading to a huge decrease in trade and a huge increase in shortages of basic goods. The Jedi would ultimately have to step up and take up a larger role in the military, and at the same time they would even serve as Chancellor of the Republic, something that technically is against the Jedi Code, but again, these were pretty dire times, as many worlds were not only falling apart, but they were regressing from a technological standpoint and becoming primitive again. It was also said that during this time that the Jedi and Sith would relax their standards for recruitment because of their desperate need for more soldiers to feed into the meat grinder. Finally, almost 1,000 years after the conflict started, the Sith were destroyed in a Pyrrhic victory at the 7th Battle of Ruusan by the Jedi-led Army of Light. The Sith threat was thought to be completely eliminated, and the Republic rapidly demilitarized and removed the Jedi from command positions, ushering in 1,000 years of peace. While all of the wars we've talked about so far were mainly a result of the ideological bickerings between the Jedi and Sith, this last one, number 1 on our list, is not. The most devastating conflict in Star Wars history was caused by the Yuuzhan Vong. These were a warrior species from another galaxy that used highly advanced bioorganic technology that was far superior to anything the Republic had at the time. The Yuuzhan Vong had traveled through the gap between the galaxy for thousands of years and laid plans for their invasion of the Star Wars galaxy as early as 4000 BBY, when the first scouts arrived in the Outer Rim. The true invasion would start 25 years after the Battle of Yavin, and the war would actually end in just 29 ABY during the Sukkot Accords. During this time, an estimated 365 trillion beings would die as a result of this galactic-wide conflict. This was a direct result of the massive size of the Yuuzhan Vong civilization and their massive horde, and also their extreme brutality, which resulted in the destruction of multiple planets and the genocide of multiple species. The Yuuzhan Vong were also the first species in the history of the galaxy to completely take over Coruscant and hold it. The fall of Coruscant signified the destruction of the New Republic and killed hundreds of billions of beings. The terraforming process that the Yuuzhan Vong would use on Coruscant would kill billions more. The threat of the Yuuzhan Vong was so great that it would ultimately lead to alliances between old enemies in the galaxy, like the Imperial Remnant and what remained of the New Republic. So there you have it, guys. 4 out of the 5 conflicts we talked about are not in any of the mainline Star Wars films, but they do represent very terrifying times in Star Wars history. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.